movement, carrying out a campaign, a signature campaign to free Mandela. I know I penned my name there. And you want to say we have not part of the history, you know, we're not there. Anyhow, I'm glad that the Burnham Foundation decided this afternoon to have some reflections and some good reflections. And we have 3 able presenters. In this order, Ronald Austin, who served as an ambassador for Guyana, Vincent Alexander, who had the privilege of studying in one of the African countries in Tanzania, and the Honorable Rashford Jackson, who is our foreign affairs expert. I will start this afternoon by giving you a brief biographic note on Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela was born on the 18th of July, 1918. He was of the royal lineage of the Tembo people of the Transkei Territories, Eastern Cape Province. His life was unending. Sorry, I have to get this right first. His life was unending jostle between studies, professional endeavors, and activism. Started duties for a Bachelor of Arts degree at the University of Fort Hare, but quit without finishing after being suspended for participating in a boycott against the quality of food protest. He attained BA from the University of South Africa by correspondence in 1943. Mandela pursued studies for a degree of law at Witwatersrand, but failed to find the final year twice and was denied the degree. In 1952, he passed the qualifying examination to become a full-fledged lawyer. He established his law practice in 1953. In 1962, he commenced correspondence studies for the Bachelor of Law at the University of London. He completed the Bachelor of Law degree in 1990 while in prison. He was married twice, fathered 6 children, but was predeceased by 3. He co-founded the African National Congress Youth League in 1944 and became the president in 1950. He came to prominence in 1952 through his participation in the defense campaign, was appointed superintendent of the Transworld chapter of the ANC in 1952, and presided over the Congress of the People in 1955, and established Umkhonto we Sizwe, the military arm of the ANC, in 1960. In 1955, he adopted the Freedom Charter, to which he remained committed and was guided by his practical politics. Mandela was detained, imprisoned, and restricted on numerous occasions, culminating in his imprisonment from 1963 for life, but was released in 1990 after serving 27 years in Robben Island, Paulsmoor, and Victor Vesta prisons. As president, he promulgated a new constitution and created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. After retirement in 1990, he mediated between the United Kingdom and Libya in relation to the Pan Am 103 bombing. He evolved from an advocate of peaceful resistance to one of armed struggle. He matured from a proponent of unilateral African struggle to that of an organizer of multiracial struggle. He became president of the ANC in 1991 after his release from prison. He assumed the presidency of Free South Africa in 1994 as the first black president. Mandela received 250 awards, including the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993. He was also the author of 3 books. The next item on this afternoon's program is a poem entitled The Age of Grace and Timeless Wisdom. And it's written by Mr. Aston Collins, a young man who lived in South Africa for a number of years and received the highest youth award, the National Youth Award of South Africa. He is involved in leadership development, currently on a world tour, but he also serves as youth ambassador for Dr. Miles Monroe. And in all his work, his programs, and his travels, he has been more fortunate than any of us here to have met Michelle Obama. And so I invite Mr. Aston Collins to do his poem, one he wrote about Nelson Mandela. Mr. Collins.
The thing about South Africa, they speak 11 official languages. And a country with 52 million people, very dynamic, and the land possesses you. And I believe that we owe it to ourselves as people of color to visit there. My problem is very simple, and one thing I would like to explain to you is the spirit of Ubuntu, which Nelson Mandela embodied. And it's the spirit of humanity. I am because you are. And no one man can rise above the condition of the masses. He was so concerned about his community and society that he sacrificed himself selflessly. So that's a challenge for us as a people. The age of grace and timeless wisdom. Have you ever observed a lion bound or witnessed the ants freely running around? Did you ever stop to ponder your destiny? Journeying beyond your daily responsibility. What is the purpose of tomorrow? If there is no comfort in times of sorrow, could you clarify the functionality of femininity and explain the multiplicity of masculinity? Nelson Mandela, you have given us a proud legacy. Thus, the future generations, you are legendary. You have taught us, your people, to forgive, and have shown us that only in love can we live. Your life displayed the fundamentals of greatness and uncovered the power of selflessness. We thank you for giving us back our home, a paradise where all of mankind has made their own. You have suffered inconceivable cruelty to ensure the preservation of our humanity. As a people, our coming together in celebration demonstrates to your sincere love and appreciation. We recognize the relevance and power of spirituality while experiencing the beauty of freedom and unity. Your life has become the essence of the human story. one of love and resolve, equality and destiny. You are a hero internationally and not only in Africa. So the world pauses to celebrate you, Tata Madiba. Isi kambuzo sotandu utandu wena ingia bonk. Thank you very much.
Madiba. We will now begin the presentations, and the first presentation will give us a historical perspective. Remember, we're looking at the life and works of Nelson Mandela. And to do this, I will invite one who is knowledgeable, is always writing, is versed in foreign policy, and his last position in the Foreign Service was Guyana's ambassador to China. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Ambassador Ronald Austin.
If you, for example, chose anybody in the 20th century, any great emancipator of their country and societies, whether it's Lenin, Mao, or any great leader, when you tally on one side what they've done effectively and put it against the other side, what Mandela has done creatively, peacefully, permanently in South Africa is matched nowhere else. With Stalin, you have to look for an asterisk at the bottom. That's the number of people who perished as a result of what he did. The same is true for Mao. I simply cannot tell you this afternoon what it is that Mandela did to transform South Africa peacefully. Maybe in the interactive period we may have subsequent to our presentation this afternoon, we may wish to look at that question, because South Africa stood on the brink of a major social disaster in 1990, after Mandela was released from prison. It could have gone in a number of directions, racially, politically, economically. What it is that Mandela did eventually to persuade even his own party to negotiate with the clerk of the company is to a certain extent something which is shrouded in mystery so far, but the point is that he succeeded in doing it, and doing it effectively, because today South Africa stands as a country that has been radically transformed. It is prosperous. I can't say racially harmonious, but it is going in that direction. And it easily stands as a model for the rest of the African continent. It is interesting that many years ago, when I was quite a young student, I was taught the classics. In the 5th century BC, Pericles, orating on those who served the Greek nation, pinpointing what Mandela did. He said that Mandela is one of those people whose lives inspired people to action and words, and that is true. So far we've had a lot of words coming from different parts of the world. I only hope in my own, our own little corner of this world, that we can take action on the basis of what Mandela did. And when I say this, I mean it very seriously. Can we move this country beyond where it stands today, racially and otherwise, based on the example that Mandela has set? I hope by the end of this presentation, the principles which enrich Mandela's life will be a guiding star. That it will be refined as I speak this afternoon by both Mr. Jackson and my friend Vincent Alexander. But let me quickly make a detour, however brief, through the Mandela's life, the history of the ANC. I trust me, I will not be very long. This is not an afternoon for long speeches. I'll go through very quickly what I've done. The interesting thing about South Africa is that as you read its history, is that what happened when the Hoses, especially, and the rest of the people of South Africa opposed the Dutch and the British, the Dutch first of all in 1652, the British later on in the 19th century, is that what Mandela and Tambo and the rest of them and Mbeki and those fellows did was a continuation of a resistance to oppression and domination. It took the Dutch over 100 years to try to subdue the Dutch and the South African people. They never succeeded. It took the British with trickery and the reinforcement of military reinforcement to subdue South Africa. But as Mandela said in the speech in the Rugodi trial, these ideas as to how they resisted oppression was passed down to him from the chief when he sat as a boy at the knees of his elders and ancestors and heard what it is that they need to do to get rid of oppression, to maintain the dignity as a people, and to make sure that South Africa did not belong to any foreign group of people. What is also interesting is that when you look at the history of South Africa, it's a lot of what you see on, not Facebook, but Google. A lot of it is misleading. What you had in effect going on from the longest possible period, as long as 200, that's the date they give 200 years ago. 200,000 years. A civilization in the southern part of Africa. Exemplified by, for example, the Zimbabweans, which Mr. Jackson knows a lot about. So, out of this womb, out of this civilization, Mandela emerged. And I wish to contend this afternoon, as I said briefly, that Mandela he was a representative of a civilization superior to what the Dutch tried to establish in South Africa after 1652. The laws passed by the Boers after 1948 is nothing short of shameless, nothing short of horrible, nothing short of indecent. And what Mandela, Tambo, and those fellows were trying to do is to bring South Africa back to the beneficiary of a civilization that existed a long time before the Boers turned up in South Africa. And in fact, the reign apartheid stands like a terrible hiatus between what was South Africa as a civilization and what it became after 1948 and beyond. And that is why, I don't know if you've been following what has been going on. McElroy, who was in prison with Mandela, said the reason why they never had a problem with Mandela negotiating with the clerk is that he always considered himself to be a superior to the apartheid regime. He looked not down on them, but as somebody coming from a civilization that was greater than what they represented. They represented backwardness. He represented enlightenment.
Right.
Thank you. And that is the greatest Mandela coming out of prison. Coming out of prison and looking around him, he decided, look, I represent something that is greater than what they tried to do to me. And don't forget what Mandela went through in prison. The first day they went to Robben Island, the prison guard who had gone to the above them, the flooring of they urinated down on Mandela and all of the other prisoners at the time. Yet Mandela went through that. He went through the horror of 27 years of prison on Robben Island. And I don't know if you've seen the size of the prison. It was so small, I simply can't understand how it is he survived with his sanity. But he did. But he came out of prison and he decided that I'm the better man. And I'm not only the better man, I will demonstrate to the Boers and the rest of South Africa, the other races of South Africa, that I'm going to lead this nation peacefully, honestly, and based on a greater element of a spirit civilization. And I speak for myself. That is what has struck me most about Mandela, because I don't know of many people who have emerged from prison without bitterness, without hatred. When they held the rugby finals, I can't remember the year it was, I think it's 1995, and they asked Mandela, well, what anthems are you going to play on this occasion? He said, play both of them. The one for the Boers and the one for a free South Africa. He established, as will be discussed with you later this evening, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and everything came up. The man who imprisoned, who destroyed, who made life hell for blacks in South Africa, he ended up washing the feet of the women that he had killed as the chief of police. And that man, in an interview, said he only did it because of what Mandela represented. It is hard to put in words what it is that Mandela did subsequent to 1990 in February. I don't think anybody, all of the commentators, the writers, the orators, and the people who have spoken about what happened after he went to prison can tell you what precisely it was. A spiritual transformation. A spiritual transformation that has led for significant good in the modern world. The 20th century was soaked in blood. You start with the Nazis, start with Treblinka, start with all of the prison camps, and even my friend Stalin, who one has to confess is a great man. He paid, the Russian people paid their price in, I don't know, it's $1 million, 2, 3. Mao, when it comes to revolution, 10 million. Not Mandela. He did it peacefully. And if anybody, whether in this room or beyond, can tell me how he did it, I will congratulate them, and if necessary, buy them a double rum after we leave here this evening. On a serious note, and I said I'm going to be brief. We cannot take Mandela's life as it is. Mandela, as I said, stands by himself, but do not forget that he had, for the want of a better word, some help. With Mr. Jackson's help and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I served in Zambia for over 3 years. I met a lot of the South Africans. So the first thing that strikes you about them, they are highly intelligent people. And I would discuss events and affairs in South Africa. I'll never forget, one of them told me, yes, Nelson is in a category above everybody else. But do not forget Walter Sisulu. I think I told Aubrey in the phone when he asked me to speak this afternoon about Mandela. I said, Aubrey, you forgive me if I seem to be varying from the theme, or the meme, as the Americans say on the television and so on. Mandela. Yes, Mandela. Walter Sisulu is the one who identified Mandela as having leadership qualities. Walter Sisulu was a man, he was a very tall man from the pictures that I've seen, who, when Mandela approached him and said, I'm going to engage in discussions with the clerk, and he said, Madiba, I only hope you know what you're doing. The same thing for Maharaj. The same thing for Tokyo Sexwali. The same thing for Ramaphosa. Sure. But what you realize when it came to, and you realize I've gone into the area of the negotiations with, I've made that leap. negotiations with de Klerk and the apartheid regime at the time. What Mandela saw, all of those people could not see. As a matter of fact, Mandela came under serious, he got into serious problem with the rest of the ANC in negotiating with the de Klerk regime. It comes back to the point I've been trying to make this afternoon. Mandela is an extraordinary person. What he saw in 1989, not one single, as far as I've been able to discover, not one single member. And if there's an exception, I should be reminded about it this afternoon, could see what it is he was trying to do. And there is a story that is told, that I think it's Toki Sexual, who went to see Mandela where he was, after they shifted him from Robben Island to the prison, where he was given better facilities to go to de Klerk. And he said, Madiba, you're selling us out. And Mandela said, well, tell me what are your views. And I think it's Toki Sexual, if I remember correctly. He said, we're going to shoot the board down. And Mandela said, how many people have you got? You know, you're going to kill, what, 15 million? 10 million? How are you going to fight it? And later on, he came back to Mandela and said, you know, Madiba, what you're saying is right. What you're saying is correct. We have to negotiate. Walter Sisulu, Mac Mirage, Tokyo Sexuale, Ramaphosa, and all those people came around to Mandela's view. Do not forget, it was not easy to convince the ANC that this was a time for negotiation. I think what Mandela saw in the background to what he was doing is the collapse of the Berlin Wall, the transformation that was going on in the rest of the world. And he understood that the time had come to negotiate. Mr. Jackson, when I was in the forum, she reminded me, I asked his forgiveness in repeating these things. When Mandela was asked to negotiate, at first the clerk said, no, I'll negotiate with you while you're in prison. Mandela said, no. Only free men can negotiate. And the concept of freedom for him and emancipation, even at the point where he was at a grave disadvantage in jail, never left his mind. I think I want to come closely to what I want to say this afternoon, and to say to you that I hope Guyana has taken a leaf out of the Mandela liberation playbook. President Obama said that Mandela belongs to the ages. He does. Mandela has left a blueprint for any society that is riven by racial problems, racial violence, and racial consequences. I know it troubles me sometimes that South Africa, which had this system of apartheid, this horrible system of racial division, seemed to be able, and I can't predict what the outcome will be, to be able to get the racial problem certainly in a more manageable way than we seem to do in Guyana. After 40 or 50 years of independence, we are still a racially divided society. There's nobody who has emerged yet as a Mandela figure. And that reminds me, could I say I pray very Douglas, very quickly, that it saddens me as I speak to you this afternoon that the People's National Congress in the form of Mr. Forbes Burnham, who have done so much for the freedom and liberation of Southern Africa, could not get Oliver Tambo Award. I will not speak too much about that. I was involved in it over a relatively protracted period, and it hurts that the South Africans did not recognize that Burnham had did, and this in relation to the Burnham Foundation, more than any Caribbean leader for the liberation of South Africa. And I say in this context too, which is omitted from all the discussion of Mandela, what Castro did, first of all in '76, and subsequently at Puerto Valley, I think in 1988. That must also be recorded. Having said all that, I wish to say to you this afternoon that I sit here this afternoon very proud of Nelson Mandela, what he does, and his life not only influences President Obama and the rest of the United States and so on, he's been a guiding star for myself as an individual. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Austin. We'll keep it rolling. And I now invite one who came through the youth arm into the leadership of the People's National Congress. He studied in Tanzania and has been involved in so many different things. Currently, he serves as the registrar of the University of Ghana, and I invite Mr. Vincent Alexander to look at the national perspective as he relates to the life and works of Nelson Mandela.
Thank you very much, Madam, for liberation in Southern Africa and Ghana's commitment, a testimonial. During the life of Lyndon Fox Sampson and the period of struggle for liberation in Southern Africa, Ghana was an unswerving supporter of the struggle. Its commitment was both moral and material. And that can be described as all the ends, moral and material. And it's quite coincidental that those ends, moral and material, also speak to the man of whom we are speaking about today, Mandela. All the ends. Much has been said and will be said on Guyana's international contribution to that struggle. However, there are still those who would wish to describe Guyana's contribution as brinkmanship on the part of our former leader, Lyndon Fox Sampson Burnham. My contribution today is intended to debunk any such notion by providing an insight of the level of people commitment and effort that Burnham mobilized internally in the moral and material sphere in aid to struggle in Southern Africa. In fact, it became a people's struggle rather than any play of words and actions. Indeed, the Guyanese became committed to the struggle in Southern Africa and South Africa in particular. And this reminds me of an occasion in Hungary in 1982. I was participating in something then called a peace march, where there was a convergence of what was called the Western March, coming from Zurich, and the Eastern March coming from Frankfurt. And we were in Hungary, a communist country at the time, visiting a school with the Communist League. And a young member of the Communist League asked us a question. He said, "You guys are having all of these peace marches. These are stage marches. These are marches organized by the Soviet government. This can't be something very serious." I think most persons were stunned to see a young communist posing that kind of question right in the midst of Eastern Europe. And not very many persons were prepared to answer the question. And I came to the fore and I said to the young man, "I cannot hold a brief for the Soviet state, for the Communist Party. That's not my business. But my participation in this march," I said to him, saw people on the streets of Kyiv, I don't very much in the news these days, literally crying when they remember what happened during the Second World War, the carnage and the loss of life. And I said that whatever you might take on the Peace March, those tears were not state-mobilized tears. They were tears from the bottom of people's hearts because of their experience of the Second World War. And I say that to say to you that it is the same analogy, or the analogy one can draw in the Ghana situation. The Ghanaians were not participating because Gordon was being a brinkman, a smart politician. They were participating because they needed to understand what the struggle meant for the people of Africa and for us here in Ghana as well. So my contribution today will therefore be a testimony of the Guyanese heartfelt and wholehearted contribution to the struggle. In articulating this strategy for Ghana's support to the struggle in Southern Africa, Burma mandated the youths of the country and the young socialist movement at that time to do the internal mobilization for the support of the struggle. That was the mandate that Burma gave to us, to mobilize internally to support the struggle in Southern Africa and South Africa in particular. That mobilization took various forms. May month was designated as the month in each year when we accentuated our national liberation activities. It was the month of national liberation, separate and apart being the month of independence and the month of Youth Week. May was also National Liberation Month. Thus, a specific day, May 24th, was declared and set aside for manifest activities. Yes, we dedicated May 24th as a day in the year when we will have major activities to mark the liberation struggle in Southern Africa. And the YSM was given the task to organize those activities. The YSM centered its activities around an annual candlelight parade that saw hundreds, if not thousands of young people marching through the streets of Georgetown, culminating at Imaniana, where there is a Namibia monument, in the form of a vigil which they mounted for over 12 standing hours. The intent and effort of that activity was to make the nation at large aware of the struggle and to create a consciousness that made the government's actions truly representative of the level of commitment of the Guyanese people. It helped to create an environment where the people voluntarily engage in activities or contribute to activities in aid of the liberation struggle. As a consequence, the young people were also engaged in fundraising activities that were intended to ensure that even the widow's mite was mobilized for the struggle in South Africa. Today, I have a vivid memory of those donation sheets that young people took to the streets with the intent to ensure that Ghana met its financial commitment which it had itself established, a commitment to contribute towards the struggle in Southern Africa. And incidentally, not have been very wrong when she said 50,000 Ghana dollars, because I think the exchange rate was that close.
Yes.
It could have been 50,000 Ghana dollars, but it was, in fact, 50,000 US dollars that we contributed to the struggle in the first instance in Southern Africa. I recall the Women's Auxiliary of the People's National Congress under the leadership of the late Jane Phillips Gay, and subsequently the Women's Revolutionary Socialist Movement under the leadership of the late Viola Berman, even mobilizing material support, oftentimes in the form of clothing for brothers and sisters in Southern Africa. I can also recall the numerous education sessions that were held in workplaces and places of education, schools, which were undertaken to raise public consciousness and to mobilize the philanthropy of the Guyanese people. Only 2 days ago, a former GDF soldier who was unknown to me reminded me of my own efforts in public education in my visitation to Camp Ayakana to share with the ranks of the army information on the struggle in Southern Africa. Much of this, in my case, happened after I returned from Tanzania, a frontline state in the then struggle, where even as we did physical education, we chanted liberation and anti-apartheid slogans. We were truly imbued with the spirit of solidarity. We were also imbued to the extent that we became conscious, articulate, proactive, and personally committed to the struggle. It became an emotional, material, and even physical struggle for the young people of the army. That also took the form of robust efforts we made during the Free Mandela campaign. The Free Mandela Signature campaign and the automatic support for the band of cricketers and cricket teams of cricketers who played in South Africa. Testimonially, I share the following. In 1978, a Chinese vice president was scheduled to visit Guyana, and the young socialist movement was approached to be a part of a welcoming party at the Timiri airport. We objected to being a part of that welcoming party. We did that because of the role that the Chinese played at that time in facilitating oppression and apartheid in South Africa. You may know that in the battles for the freedom of Angola, the South Africans were, ANC in particular, fighting along MPLA in that struggle. At that time, there was Chinese intervention and support for the reactionary forces of holding Roberto, FMLA. So at the same time that Ghana became involved when the Cuban troops were ferried through Ghana to go to Angola. We refused to be a part of the welcoming party because with the revolutionary spirit and a level of solidarity we could not see ourselves, even though there were state relations between Guyana and China. We could not see ourselves as a young socialist movement, as revolutionaries, welcoming the Chinese. And when late Lieutenant Bob Sampson were to pose the question to me as to why we had done that, we made it very clear that we could not be party to welcoming the Chinese at that time, notwithstanding the relationship between the two states. We were really committed national liberation and the anti-apartheid struggle. On another occasion, the Chinese approached the Young Socialist movement to send a delegation to a Congress of the Youth League of the Communist Party of China, all expenses paid. We refused their invitation at that time, since we could not countenance the reactionary politics in Southern Africa. That was the level of commitment of the young people. On a subsequent visit to North Korea, very much in news these days, they approached me with the carrot of a ticket to travel from Korea to China. I refused as a matter of principle. How could I, with all of the education about and commitment to national liberation, struggle in Southern Africa, struggle against apartheid, sell my conviction for a few pieces of silver? That we were so committed was also attributed to our knowledge, not only of the injustices that were being meted out to our brothers and sisters in Africa, but to the leadership and sacrifices that the Mandelas were exhibiting and going through respectively on the front line in Africa. We were aware of how Mandela had placed his life on the line for liberation in Africa. We understood that the struggle was ours, their struggle was ours, and their success would have been ours as well. History has vindicated us. The Mandelas have vindicated us. And today we come to salute the life of Nelson Mandela. A life that was committed to struggle, not only for the people of Africa, but for all humanity. We follow Mandela's route as a thinker and a freedom fighter. We attribute our own call for an understanding of shared governance, the lessons learned from the magnanimity of Nelson Mandela, a man who grew from peaceful struggle. When Mandela entered the struggle, originally his advocacy was for peaceful struggle. But he evolved from peaceful struggle to armed struggle, and then to diplomacy, and ultimately to victory. A man who grew from partisan racial struggle. When Mandela started the struggle, his view was that the Africans in South Africa should go it alone. They should not join with any other ethnic group in the struggle for self-determination. He started here, but he ended up in universal struggle for humanity, joining hands with others. Mandela has died. What he stood for lives on in us and may inspire us even as we struggle to ensure human dignity and justice in our own society. May Mandela live on in our struggles, in our victories. We are forever indebted to him. Let me back.
It's a good time for me to ask you all to stand as we observe 1 minute silence for Mandela. Our permanent representative to the United Nations, who would have been involved in non-alignment, our anchor in foreign affairs, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Rashid Jackson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. I'd like to join